moment of uh, memory slip, and then they go out of the moment because they're relying on just one aspect, such as uh, physical memory, right? So what we want to have is as many ways of trying to identify the interval. So one way is hearing it, right? And really knowing how each dichord sounds, so you can identify them by ear. But also what we want to have is sort of this physical sensation of the dichord, right? So one versus a two. I always use a more crunchier, darker, compact feeling in my hands when I hear a one, as opposed to a two, which to me sounds more released, right? So even though they're both dissonant notes, one is more compact, two is more open, right? And three and four works the same way. Three is more coming in. It come back down to the second interval, right? And then the four wants to expand out to the fourth, right? So it always feels a little bit more open than a minor third or a three, right? And then the fives and seven, dum, bum, that fourth always wants to come back, right? And then the thumb, ba, it opens up. It has this expansion feel. So the second way you want to lock into hearing these dichords is a physical sensation rather than auditory sensation, right? And then also a third route into identifying these intervals is to really think about it in your mind's eye as a visual cue, right? So even if you're not a pianist, we all know what a keyboard looks like. So try to imagine on the keyboard tracking. So one of the exercises I also do is I start with a note, and we'll just do it right now. So what I'll do is I'll ask you to imagine the keyboard. Can't you see? Imagine the keyboard, and we'll start on middle C of the keyboard. Okay. And what we're going to do is we start at the beginning with just like your hearing is limited to ones and twos, it's easier by itself. We're going to just limit it to ones and twos. Okay. And you might want to just jot down on a note paper 10 slots and do it right now. Okay. And you might just do up a one, down a one, up a two, down a two, and just random numbers and random direction, but only is in ones and twos. Okay. And then an arrow sign going up or down. Okay. So what we're going to do is track the keyboard in your mind's eye without hearing the pitches. Okay. So once somebody's ready, if you're ready to, so I'll demonstrate, okay? All right, let me know if you're all written. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to track in your mind's eye where we are on the keyboard. We're starting on middle C, but I'm not going to play any of the notes, but I'm gonna say up or down and upper, how many interval, upper one, upper two, and something like that. And what you're gonna do is track where you are on that keyboard in your mind's eye, and then at the end of the 10 notes, then you have to identify where you are on the keyboard. All right, here we go. Starting from middle C. Upper one, upper two, upper one, upper one, upper two, upper one. Where are we?
I don't know. Can we try again?
We got A flat. Okay, we'll do it again. I'll do a little bit slower, okay? Starting from middle C. Upper one, upper two, upper one, upper one, upper two, upper two.
G sharp.
Almost. A natural.
B flat. Okay.
Okay. So what you don't want to do is it's almost impossible to go back and retrace. So what you want to do is, as I say the number and the interval or up or down direction, you want to get there. Okay, so I'll slow down just a couple tiny clicks. Okay, and I'm going to go downwards now. Starting from middle C. Down a one, down a two, down a one, down a two. Where are we?
F sharp.
F sharp, excellent. Okay, starting from F sharp. Here we go. upper 2, upper 2, upper 1, upper 2, upper 2.
E flat.
E flat, excellent. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna go up and down, okay? Starting from E flat. Upper 1, down a 2, upper 1, down a 2, upper 1, down a 2.
B.
Natural.
Oh, natural. Okay.
Okay. So this is actually, it forces you to train your mind's eye to be much more powerful than it is right now. Okay, so our ability to access that part of the brain is crucial in identifying what the pitches are, because it gives you another avenue into identifying the pitch class. Okay, so I'd like you to add this exercise, and it'll take you literally less than a minute. Okay, so each day start from a, and you can be at the keyboard or draw a keyboard. Okay, and just practice that. Okay, and then you can actually just maybe the night before write random numbers and random directions, 1s and 2s, up or down. Okay, and then the next morning you try to do that. Okay, and then start from different pitches. Okay, and once you get really good at tracking 1s and 2s, then you expand out to including 3s and 4s, and so forth. And what you'll find is your ability to identify by ear by doing this exercise will also improve. It's kind of amazing. Okay, so that physical sensation of feeling the difference between 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s and 7, right? Added to that, your first level of hearing the interval, right? And also you have to really hear it in your mind's ear as well. Imagine the interval. Imagine it without playing on the piano, what the 1s and 2s sounds like in your mind's ear. Okay, so that's the very first level. Second level is the physical sensation. Third level is developing your mind's eye, where you're starting to track the intervals in your mind's eye. All right, now you have a three-pronged approach of hearing these intervals. And if you do this in a consistent way, you'll be able to fool people that you have perfect pitch. I don't have perfect pitch. I have perfect relative pitch. If somebody gives me a starting pitch, I can pretty much get wherever I need to go. Okay, so because it's all about context. And often the downfall of people who have perfect pitch is they are not able to have these multiple ways of getting there. So they're relying on one aspect of hearing the pitch, and that can be unreliable. Okay, so what you want to do is try to develop as many different layers of identifying a note: physical sensation, mind's eye, mind's ear, and then sort of theoretical programming of knowing what the intervals are, and the dichord assignment of knowing, like, without any hesitation, knowing what a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 is, right? So that you can really picture that immediately, right? If you can't do that, you won't be able to hear the pitches. Okay, all right. So continue to work through that, okay? All right. I want to take some time today and talk about many different things, but today I do want to have a session on Beethoven 5 and do more, so to help you make that video, the Beethoven 5 video. But the next thing I want to do is kind of pull up, because many of you have done the Adoration project, and so if I have people's permission, EJ, can I show your arrangement to people?
Oh yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so I will go to, wait a minute. So I made a mistake. There are two sections. So, but anyway. Okay, so here is EJ's arrangement. And both Rehan and Peter made similar choices in terms of, and this is the original, where did it go? This is the original version, right? The original organ version. Right? And the original organ version has a melody in the top line, right? There's a moment where here where the main line goes down to the bass clef, but mostly it's a very top heavy instrumentation in terms of the melody, the assignment of the melody being mainly in the right hand pinky, right? So many of the arrangements have stayed true to that and left the main role of the melody in the first violin part. Now EJ does a little bit more by assigning in this section, the adagio section, where the second violin has a more prominent part than the first violin, which I love. Okay, so one of the things that whenever you are arranging a piece for your ensemble, one of the things that that you should think about as an arranger is about the entire experience of every member of the orchestra, right? So in both Rehan and EJ's arrangements, pretty much the melody stays in the violin, first and second violin part, which means the rest of your orchestra, violas, cellos, and basses, have a pretty boring part, right? So, which is fine, and it's a relatively short piece, and the arrangement is really staying true to the original assignment of the melodic lines, right? So you're not really changing how the piece sounds, right? However, here's an opportunity when you can actually arrange the piece, and you can actually make the parts much more interesting for the rest of the ensemble. So you imagine what would happen if, for example, in different parts, you assigned the melodic workload to different instruments of the orchestra and not just the violins, right? So then the orchestra imagine yourselves as members of the orchestra playing whatever piece it is, right? And this is sort of in line with the philosophy of how I think about what pieces to program. So if I'm programming once there was a guest conductor who really were interested in doing a couple pieces, but she suggested the program. So out of the 4 pieces, 2 pieces didn't have violin parts. Like in the music, there was no violin part. So I said, okay, I think it might be okay for one piece to not have violins, but violins are like 40% of my orchestra. So you can't just not have to program where the violins are not playing the concert at all, right? So we had quite a bit of back and forth about this. So in a similar way, when you're thinking about programming a particular work, you have to think about what is the experience of the orchestra members, right? So if you find that, if let's say you have a tuba player or a harp player, something unusual that is usually not in every piece, then you have to really carefully consider your programming. And I've sort of threw out programs in the past because during audition week, a harpist shows up. In fact, there's one year I had 2 harpists show up at my doorstep on audition week. And I realized I didn't have a single piece with harp on the program. So I had to kind of throw out half the programs to make sure the 2 harpists were involved, right? Now, I didn't change the entire season because at that point I had already rented pieces. The parts were ready to be handed out. So that would have been way too different. And I spent most of the summer studying these pieces. So, but I had enough repertoire in my backlog that I could bring back pieces that included 2 harps. So, so one of the things that as a conductor of in an educational institution like Cornell, that is always on my mind of what is the experience of the orchestra members in the orchestra that I conduct, right? So you can't be sort of thinking only of, well, the melody's in the top line, so I'm just going to give the melody to the violin. So, so I'll show you my arrangement. And so I didn't put in most of the dynamics, but the note assignments are there. So what I've done in the first portion And actually, maybe I can play it for you. Hang on, let me reshare the screen. Yeah, share computer sound. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my Sibelius file, and I will play back. Here we go. So right in the beginning, instead of having the melody just in the violin, I've shared it with the violin and cello. So it's being played by both violin and cellos. And then in the next phrase, it's the violas and the second violin who carries the melody. And then they continue on there. And then from here, and UJ made a similar choice here, whether it's the cellos and basses, but I felt like the basses really didn't get to do anything in the piece. And that there was one place that they could have a little bit of a featured moment with cellos and basses there. And then in this sort of transition section, the violas and cellos are playing the counter melody. And then that gave me a sense that, okay, here at 25, I could really afford to give the first and seconds this melody. Okay, and then they continue on, and then that section ends. Now, what I did here was, instead of doing a literal going back to the DS, what I did was I wrote out a DS, but changed the instrumentation. So instead of going back and having the same instrumentation, now only the violas and cellos have the melody, and the first and seconds are serving a harmonic role. And then at the end of that phrase, first and seconds take over the melody again. And then first and seconds end the melody. So this way, it's a little more, the load sharing of the melody. I can get the orchestra involved in a more equitable way, right? Okay, let's hear what this sounds like. Oh, sorry. Let's go back to the beginning. And actually, that adding of that lower octave really makes that melody much fuller, and I kind of like it. Obviously, you would tell the harmony people in the first glance to be softer than the melody. And I doubled the melody cello there a little bit, just like the beginning. And instead of going to the DS, it does go back to the DS, but now I changed the instrumentation. Where the violas and cellos have the melody. Yeah, if I had more time, I would probably change the ending a little bit. So it's a little bit, because I feel like the ending ends so abruptly. That might be something and here's a part where we have to be careful about as arranger and what the role is, right? Because now I've really changed the piece. I'm starting to change the piece in a way that is much more distant from what Florence Price imagined, right? He originally imagined it for organ only. Now I've changed the instrumentation. Now I've changed where the assignment of the melody is. And as I go deeper into the piece, now I'm starting to have all kinds of ideas about how to add things, how to change things that departs from the original intent of the piece, right? And I think that's the trap Mahler fell into when he started to arrange Beethoven symphonies by increasing the number of winds. Rather than having double winds, he started to have triple winds. And then he started to add random things, reinforcing the bass line and things like that. So as a conductor, sometimes your role is to just interpret what's truly on the page of the score, right? But then as you get into this arranger transcription role model, you start to think about, imagine how the orchestra that is in front of you is interacting with the piece. And then as you delve into that work, you start to think about, well, if I just change here, it could be maybe we could have a better ending, maybe. So then you start to be more of a composer rather than a conductor. So that's sort of a different balancing line, right? Because I think changing the ending is a different thing than reassigning the melodic line so that your ensemble is more involved in carrying the melody. Rachel, you had a question.
Yeah, I was actually gonna ask about like when you're arranging something, I mean, like you can reassign the voicing, but like changing the actual notes is not
Right.
arranging.
So there's a whole spectrum of arranging, right? So there are actually a lot of educational music which takes a famous piece, but then pretty much, and you see this a lot more in big band and jazz ensembles, right? Where they there's the head, which is the melody, right? And that's pretty much the only thing that is remaining of the original piece, and everything else is changed, right? And I think that that tradition in the jazz world is much more widely accepted and encouraged, where this is my cover of this tune, right? Whereas in the orchestral world, if somebody if I came out and here's my cover of Brahms' Third Symphony, everybody like, what? And it's more, I would be criticized if I came out with an arrangement that only the melody is the same and then everything is different. Then that's not really Brahms anymore, right? And so I think there's pros and cons with that issue, actually. Obviously, if you're the composer and a random orchestra and conductors are changing your piece without your permission, that's not right. But I think this insistence upon, and this is just my opinion, insistence upon the original text, I think sometimes that can be driven too far. And I think there are, so for example, as a result of this very strict way of performing pieces the way it was intended to be, a lot of professional orchestras have just simply stopped performing Baroque music, right? Because first of all, it's the wrong size. Like if you have a 90-piece, 100-piece orchestra to play a Baroque piece, you have to either reduce it down to such a small number where maybe half of your orchestra is not playing on that concert. So rather than deal with that issue, most professional orchestras have said, you know what, let's let the early music ensembles do this repertoire, and we'll focus on 18th, 19th century repertoire only. And I think that's really a shame because, you know, for example, if you go back even 50 years, orchestras used to do a much more wider, varied program in terms of backward-looking historical pieces, in terms of including Baroque pieces. I think anytime you limit the repertoire an orchestra can do, that is not a positive thing, right? On the other hand, for example, Messiah has like 7 different versions, right? There's the ultimate like Baroque version. There's the Mozart Handel sort of large orchestra version, which adds all kinds of like trumpets and trombones to where there wasn't any large brass section in Messiah. So it's a balancing act, and I think you have to, and these are issues that you have to grapple as a conductor. Why am I doing it this way? Why am I arranging it? What is the purpose of arranging it this way? So my purpose of arranging the Florence Price into a version where the melodic line is in different places in the lower instrument is to involve the orchestra. So in that way, I can make the justification. I can't quite get to the place where I want to change the ending because I don't like the ending. And because I think that then it would be, it's just plagiarizing Florence Price into a string orchestra piece that I wrote. So I don't want to cross that bridge, but I'm willing to cross the bridge of reassigning melodic lines so that the entire orchestra can be much more involved in playing this piece and enjoy playing the piece. And henceforth get to know Florence Price's music. So I think I can make that sort of, I'm willing to sort of, plant that flag and be willing to stand by those decisions. But I think I'm unwilling to make a different ending because I don't like the original ending. Okay. Any questions regarding the Florence Price arrangement? Rehan, were you able to catch all of that?
Yeah, I was able to listen and catch that. This is the extra optional.
Yeah. Because both you and EJ and Peter had made similar choices in terms of assigning a melody to mainly to the violins. And
yeah.
Okay. Great. So let's go to the Beethoven 5. And yeah, let me just get out of that. I'll quit out of the Sibelius because that's gonna slow things down. Oh, and by the way, the video is uploading right now. Here, I'll share the screen. It's a video by James Collin. He did, and this was made available to us, people who attended the day-long webinar series surrounding LA Opera's premiere of Joseph Boulogne, The Anonymous Lover, which unfortunately I think yesterday was the last day you could watch it for free. But I managed to save this video by James Collin, and it's a fantastic video. It's about an hour long, and I would really urge you to watch the video. It basically gives a context of who Joseph Boulogne was, and he does it better than most of the things I've seen recently, and gives a short context of who he was, how he came to write the opera, and also talks quite a bit about his musical styles in context of Haydn and Mozart. So it's a fantastic overview, and in fact, he's doing this. He's doing an overview of a biography by Gabriel Banat, and I'm sort of maybe 1/10 of the way into this book, and it's really a fantastic book. But the video is basically he's really studied the book and reduced it down to a 60-minute version of it, and it gives you a really quick but detailed rundown of Joseph Boulogne. Who he was, the time. So just as an example, he talks about Joseph Banat's favorite form, which was a Symphonia Concertante. So, and he wrote like 10 of them. Unfortunately, not all of them have survived. I think there are maybe 4 of them that are surviving. And James Collin surmises that Mozart visited Paris 3 times. And of course, Joseph Boulogne was quite in favor with the French court. And so he was employed by the court to do various things and write music, conduct orchestras. And so James Collin realizes that Mozart was in Paris 3 times. And in the 3rd visit was when Mozart spent about 6 weeks in the court, in the Paris court, as a guest of Marie Antoinette. And at that time is when they probably met, Joseph Boulogne and Mozart. And it's interesting, until that visit, Mozart had never written a Sinfonia Concertante. But after that visit, he writes the famous violin viola Sinfonia Concertante. And James Collin even picks out a recording of a Sinfonia Concertante by Joseph Boulogne that survives, that is quite similar to the Mozart. So James Collin is making a theory that Mozart encountered Joseph Boulogne's music, and just as he had done through all of his travel, Mozart would go somewhere and then hear something, pick it up, and then incorporate it into his own style of writing, but make it kind of like 5 times better. But here's a case in which Mozart met Joseph Boulogne while he was living for 6 weeks in Marie Antoinette's court during his visit to Paris. And he met and sort of engaged with Joseph Boulogne in a number of ways, including being exposed to his Sinfonia Concertante. And then afterwards decides to write his own Sinfonia Concertante. So that's just one of the things he brings out. Another big sort of reveal to me was, so Joseph Boulogne's, one of his tasks was to, on behalf of the Paris court, commission composers from other countries, including Haydn. So what we now know as the famous Paris symphonies by Haydn was actually commissioned by Marie Antoinette's court. But the person who's in charge of the details of executing the commission in terms of the sending out the contract and making the agreement terms of the contract was Joseph Boulogne. And not only that, Joseph Boulogne was the conductor who premiered the Paris symphonies by Haydn in Paris. So he's not just sort of a outside figure that's sort of somebody dug up as somebody we should know. He was actually quite central to classical music with Haydn and Mozart and in Paris. And it's, in fact, he was in such favor with the court. Marie Antoinette wanted him to be the music director of the Paris Opera. But there was quite a bit of intrigue. And in fact, James Conlon surmises that one of the persons, another conductor who wanted to be himself the music director of the Paris Opera, conspired against Joseph Boulogne so that he would not be able to be the music director, accusing him of having an affair with a noblewoman. And at that point, if you're a Black person having an affair with a white noblewoman, that's pretty much it's like the worst thing you could have done, right? So so it's a really interesting talk. I would really encourage you to look at it when you have time over the break after the course is done. The video has been made to us with the permission that it's not shared widely. So I'm asking you not. I mean, I have a unlisted link on YouTube just so that you guys can watch it. But I'll probably take it down in January because I don't want to be called by the LA Opera. Okay, so that link, I will take it down in January. So it's yours to look at until that point. Okay, so enjoy that link. Okay, let's go to the Beethoven. I'm going to go to the advanced share screen. Let's look at the score for a second. There we go. Let's close that one. Okay, we had talked about the issue of getting out of these fermatas, but another thing and then we also had talked about the hypermeter of trying to think about the 4-bar pattern. I hope by this point you have all gone through your scores and made where the hypermeters are, right? One thing that's a little confusing are these, how to count these fermata bars. And then those 6 extended bars that comes out once in a while, right? But except for those places, most places, it should be a 4-bar phrase, right? Does anybody have questions about the hypermeter and where they are? Because as you go through the score, because of the fermatas, sometimes how you count the fermatas, it can be a little confusing because it seems like the hypermeter rule has been sort of just kind of wedged in there. I always felt like it wasn't such an elegant explanation of how hypermeters fit in. So for example, at the end of the exposition, whether in the repeat sign, there's 3 empty bars, right? So 1, 2, 3, and then it comes back to the beginning. So that this is definitely a 4. 4 and 1, 2, da 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 dee, right? And then here, so if you count that 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4, then this becomes a 5, but I think that's wrong. So this bar is supposed to be a 4 into the downbeat, right? So in a way, you have to kind of figure out what that means here. So this is definitely a 4, and this is definitely a 4. But if you go 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that doesn't work. If you go 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, that doesn't work, right? So I think you have to just kind of give the benefit of the doubt that these fermatas are meant to be counting longer. As long as you end up here, this is a 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, so on. Okay. Let's go to that 6-measure extension bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's an extension, 5, 6. Right. So these forzandos, it's clear that this is one idea. This is one sentence, right? It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. That doesn't make sense. So these 2 bars in the extension of that idea is extended 2 more bars. Okay, and then 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Now here is where it gets a little confusing because this idea, right, seems like it makes sense for this to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? So whenever I analyze this, I thought, oh, that's one phrase. And then next phrase, and that, in fact, if you listen to many recordings, that's how most orchestras phrase it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? But in terms of the hypermeter, 1, this is a 4, right? Because that's always been a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, da da dee da. So that the phrasing, it seems like it's broken here in terms of this is a pickup rather than a downbeat. All right, and that's an idea. It took a long time for me to sort of get used to. Right, because it just seems natural. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that seems like more of a natural thing. And I think instinctively when orchestras play this, that's how they play, right? Because they see this downbeat, 1 and sol do si do re la la sol, and they naturally phrase it there. Almost, it's hard for you to convince the orchestra sol do si do re la la sol. But in fact, this dissonant B is actually that's the expressive part, right? Okay, so that goes along, chugs along, and here's another 2-bar extension here somewhere, right? So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Yeah, so here is a 2-bar extension. Da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 bee da ba da dee da ba da bee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 bee ba bee da ba ba bee da ba ba bee da ba da 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 ba 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 bee ba 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 3 and 1 and then the 2 and then the 3 4 and then the 1 da 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 1 2 and the 3 4 and the 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 more 5 measure 5 bar phrase here right here. Here's, you expected the 4 hit to be here, but he da 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 dum, nope, ba 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 ba, right? So as you go through these phrasing, really know where you are in terms of where the hypermeter is and where the extension bars are. Okay. Questions on that? Yeah, Rachel.
When we make the actual recording,
Mhm.
should we do like use the score in just this excerpt or like the whole first movement?
I mean, so here's the thing. The reason for me to use this shorthand score, right, early in the course was because it was easier to just limit it to that 2-minute segment, right? But I think from when we are doing the entire movement like this, I think this actually gets, it shortchanges the score. So if you are able to use the whole score, then I would actually prefer you to use the whole first movement score.
And also when we play a recording, is there like a certain like tempo recording that we should use?
I will leave that to your preference, but anything that's as close to the written the metronome mark as possible would be great, because most of them are slower than 108.
Okay.
Yeah. Rehan.
When we were practicing, I think last week or a week ago, 2 weeks ago, you know how you made us for the entries, you made us point to the violas, the violins, and would you want that in the video as well?
That would be great if you could work that out, because what you
where
want
do each
to
one
try to
sit again?
imagine. So, I mean, I think Simon Rattle used to do this when he was a kid. He would lay out his teddy bears and stuffed animals in the form of an orchestra, and then he would cue the first and seconds and flutes and whatnot, right? So you might want to just like imagine, or put up like little placards saying, here are the first violins, second violins, violas, cellos, basses, and so on. Okay.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Especially in this movement, it takes quite a bit of coordination, right? Because they come so fast, right? Now, one of the things that I've encountered when conducting this piece is that if you get involved with the cueing and that becomes too important and you kind of miss the big picture, then you just basically look like a traffic cop, and it's really not useful at all. So just use the placards or stuffed animals as a way of knowing where the section is, but don't get too obsessive about cueing the right places, because this is you will look like this. Okay.
I also had one more question about the like the part you were just mentioning where it's 4 and then it's 1,
Mm-hmm.
the slurred part.
Yeah.
When you're conducting that,
Yeah.
like I was watching some people conduct it and they kind of don't do it in 1, like they don't beat every measure, and they kind
No,
of just
I think that's fine. And in fact, one of the videos to you, I was commenting that it's many times the orchestra does not need every beat, right? And actually knowing when to let go of the beat is, in some ways, it comes with experience in knowing, okay, you know what? They don't need me. They don't need my help right now, right? So in fact, when they don't need you, you don't really need to do anything, right? So when they don't need you in terms of the beats, okay, then that's a moment when you can provide something where they do need more information from you. Okay, so you might provide something else rather than beats, right? Maybe it could be some kind of color with your left hand where you leave the beat dee da dee da 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 dee da, and you lean into that resolution bar, right? Rather than ya da dee da 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 dee. That's not useful. But da da dee da da dum dee da, that's very useful. The orchestra, oh, okay, that that's that makes sense musically, right? So whenever possible, I try to leave the beats as something, because the more you beat the orchestra, and that's a terrible phrase, the more you beat the orchestra, the less responsibility the orchestra takes for pulse. Okay. And one of the big mistakes I made early in my career all the time was I have to give everything and I have to be clear. So Rehan, that issue of cueing, right? I literally looked like this sometimes early in my career. What? And then we're just like, what are you doing? Right? Because I'm like, I'm giving you all the cues. Every entry I'm giving you. And they're like, we can't decipher that. Okay, so in fact, a clear 4 pattern tells the orchestra where they are and where they're supposed to come in, rather than what? So clarity can come in different ways, right? So cues are less important, beats are less important than musical ideas. Right? And you have to, as a conductor, constantly be listening and evaluating what the orchestra is doing, what they're producing, and then figuring out, okay, I need to pull out this tool because this is a tool they need rather than this, right? So you're constantly engaging with it, and this is so difficult to do when it's just a recording, right? Because you're not really interacting, right? And one of the great regrets of this course, this format, is that you can't interact with your colleagues, your musicians, right? This is basically a one-way, no feedback situation, right? Because as a conductor, you're constantly adjusting to what people are doing in front of you and listening. That's your job, to listen and give feedback, right? But when it's a recording, it'll go on and without us, right? So you have to really temper this format, the downfall of this format. Okay, all right. So 3 principal rules I employ all the time. If I don't have to subdivide, I don't subdivide. But if I need to, because they need help, then I have to subdivide, right? So this idea of whether to subdivide or not is not a hard, fast rule. So I can't say to you, in this bar, you have to subdivide. Well, no, not really. If the orchestra can do it and they have internal pulse, you don't need to subdivide. And in fact, it'll be easier for them to put it into context because you're providing the big picture of here's 3 and 4 downbeat, rather than 3 and 4, and that can actually look like the cue thing, right? They're like, what beat is that? Is that beat 3 or is it end of 3? Or is it 3E and A, right? So, but you might have an orchestra that cannot carry the pulse. 3, what? I don't know how to get from 3 to 4. Then you might have 3 and 4 and help them a little in the subdivision. In the same way, you might have an orchestra that needs every beat. Otherwise, they start speeding up or slowing down. And you have to actually ride the reins of don't speed up, don't slow down, and provide every beat. But you might have an orchestra, and this is a chicken or the egg question, right? What comes first? Does your conducting cause an orchestra to be a certain way, right? You providing every beat, every cue, does it provide them to be unable to have their own internal pulse? And I think what I've seen in most high school orchestra situations, that the conductor is so fearful, and this is reinforced by what happens early in the process of learning the piece, right? So early in the process, the conductor conducts a certain way, maybe with subtlety, with smaller gestures, and tries to be more musical, but the orchestra is just focused on learning to stay together. And then the conductor sort of does more active beating, active subdivision, and then realize, okay, they are able to stay together when the conductor does more. And then that reinforces the idea, I have to do more, otherwise they won't be able to stay together. But of course, as the orchestra learns a piece, they need less and less of that, right? Right. If you are, again, I don't make these analogies too often. If you keep hitting a horse, then the horse at a certain point is like, you know what? Nothing, like no matter how much you hit me, I can't go any faster, right? So there comes a point where your beating or your subdivision is no longer useful to the orchestra, because they're either going as fast as they can, or they don't need that pulsation anymore, right? So this way of, and so many conducting teachers are so didactic about when to subdivide. In this part, you must subdivide. I totally disagree with that kind of conducting, where it depends. It depends on what the orchestra is doing, what they need. So it's a constantly fluctuating point of, so even the Strauss that we worked on, right? When to go into 3, when to go back into 1, right? How to make that transition. It depends. Some orchestra will do it automatically, and you can pretty much stay in 1, and just the size of the beat 1 changes. You can do that with some orchestras. With some orchestras, and if you don't do that, you feel like they're going to not do it. Well, that's not true. I think most orchestras are able to rely on this very flexible pulse if you give them room, if you give them more responsibility. I think as conductors, and this is, I think, the downfall of most conductors, where the level of the ensemble causes them to form really bad habits, right? Or early in the process of learning a piece. Because I feel like mainly when we get to performance time between a Cornell symphony and the Chicago Symphony, honestly, 2 differences. How fast do you get to performance level, right? And how many times you have to repeat something to stick, right, in rehearsal. And then consistency. Those are the 3 main differences. But when Cornell Orchestra is rehearsed well, and they're in the right mindset, they haven't had a midterm the night before the performance, and they're sort of functioning, firing at full gear, then they've been rehearsed well, they know the piece well, then they perform pretty much at 95% of most professional orchestras. Okay, it's just that sometimes the consistency of executing that particular passage is not there 100% of the time. Sometimes when you have to rehearse something, okay, we rehearsed it, and then 3 rehearsals later, they've forgotten it because they had 2 midterms in a paper. Okay, or how fast they are able to learn something, right? Because they don't spend 4 hours a day practicing. But I think the first 10 years at Cornell, I made the mistake of underestimating what the orchestra is able to do on their own, right? And this sort of switch over in my mindset of what they need from me as a conductor happened when I started to do pieces without conductor with the chamber orchestra. And I realized, oh, okay, they really don't need me at all, right? Once they get to a certain stage of rehearsal. So as a conductor, this is very, very crucial. Your role as a conductor is to facilitate the orchestra to be at their best, at their optimal, right? So the tools that you're providing in terms of beats, in terms of subdivision, in terms of phrasing, how you show things, how big you show it, how subtly you show it, it all depends on what they need, right? So it's a constantly moving variable that changes, right? And in most situations, whether it's a professional group, collegiate group, young group, it always changes. From day 1 to final performance, what they need from the conductor is different. So if you look the same from day 1 to performance, there's something seriously wrong in that picture, right? So if you're doing subtle things in the beginning of the rehearsal, what are you doing? You're not helping the orchestra at all. Nobody knows what you're doing, right? What do you need to show beats, right? But then if on the dress rehearsal and to the performance, you look the same. What are you doing? You're not responding to what they need. They actually need help there, or they don't need your help there. So I pretty much have 10 rehearsals plus a dress and a performance. I look different in every rehearsal because I'm trying to gauge what do they need today, right? So you have to do that as a conductor in no matter what situation, whether it's a professional situation, right? And be able to decipher, okay, what's happening? What do they need? All right, then I will pull out these tools, okay? And the person who is able to gauge that correctly will be able to allow the orchestra to be at their optimal playing condition. Imagine if you get in front of a Chicago Symphony or the Philadelphia Orchestra and you start conducting like a high school teacher. The orchestra's like, what is this person doing? We don't need that. We can do that without that sort of, that kind of thing, right? So it's sort of not only age appropriate or level appropriate of what you need to do in front of the orchestra, it's trying to understand who is this orchestra, what do they need, what can I provide that's going to be helpful, right? That is probably the hardest thing for conductors to try to realize what it is, right? At the professional level, what can I do that's not going to get in their way, right? What is actually going to be helpful, right? What, with a collegiate or younger group, what can I do that's going to facilitate learning of this piece in an optimal way, right? And I've seen like big name conductors give masterclass or sort of situation in a all-state situation where they were completely ineffective because they were conducting them like they were conducting a professional orchestra, right? Without adjusting to what the ensemble needed. Okay, so these are great questions because one of the things, if you get anything from this course, that's the point I want you to get, because of course, this applies to every situation in your life, whether it's an engineering team, whether it's a working group, reporters, whatever it is you're going to be faced with, right? You're going to be put into a situation as a leader of that group, trying to gauge what does this group need from me for them to be at their optimal level, right? We've all been in those groups where the leader is really micromanaging every aspect of the tasks at hand. And you're like, you know, let me just do my job, right? We've also been in situations where, can somebody give me some guidance, right? Why aren't you giving me feedback? Well, like someone tell me what I need to do or what I'm doing wrong, right? So as a leader, you have to kind of gauge what is a team, what does the orchestra need from me that's going to help them to be at their best, right? And that's a central issue to how to be that person in charge, right? It is not that you're supposed to do everything, right? If you're the kind of leader where you have to micromanage and do everything on your own, then might as well just do it on your own. You don't need a team, right? But of course, what you can achieve is limited as a result, right? If you have a team and you are fully utilizing everybody on the team to be at their best, then you can achieve so much more because you have put the right people on tasks and you're allowing them to do what they do best, right? So how do we get onto this conversation? But anyway, Rachel.
All right, if I can ask one more question, going back to when you said that musical expression is more important than beats and things like that, so like if you're just beginning, like where should you be getting those ideas for the musical expression from? Like, is it just natural or like from watching other people? Or
That's a really good question. And so I would say these things. One is you have to listen to other people, right? Because musical ideas don't come out of a vacuum, right? So, you know, if you're a pianist and you've never heard of Schnabel, then there's something wrong with you, something lacking in your training, all right? whatever instrument it is, right? So if you're a flutist and you have never heard of Rampal, then there's something wrong with you, right? If you're a violinist and you've never heard of Heifetz, there's something wrong with that training, right? So because all of those grades are great for a reason, right? So if you're a violinist, if you're whatever instrumentalist you are, if you're a conductor and you don't listen to the greats like Mervinsky and Abbado and all these great conductors of the past, right? Then there's something lacking in your education, right? So one is and an amazing resource that you all have access to that I didn't have access to when I was in my formative years is YouTube. You can pretty much look up anybody you want from history, right? And so because I encountered such racist sort of encounters as, oh, you're Asian, so there's no way you could do German repertoire. I've been in a situation, I was in a conducting master class, and this is what the teacher is telling me. So I'm like, okay, well, in a way he had a point, because I didn't grow up with that tradition with a daily exposure, right? Playing with great artists and going to concerts constantly. I didn't have that in my background. Whereas somebody growing up in Austro-Hungarian, Viennese sort of air would have much more access to that, right? But now it's global. Okay, if you really want to go steep into the Viennese tradition, you can do that. You can actually go and listen to Viennese performing style from every decade of this century, right? What the second beat in a waltz, how early that should be. You can actually go and listen to that, right? It's not 1, 2, 3. It's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? All right. But there's also a variation of how early that is, depending on even within Strauss, right? So, so one is you need to listen to many different artists. That's at your resource, okay? And then two, listening is a passive experience. So you need to actually try to do the same ideas on your instrument. Okay, so take a musical phrase, and then rather than just listen to it, sing it, play it on your instrument, and try to recreate the rubato or musical phrasing that they're doing. And only after multiple times and actually being able to play that phrasing, can you expect to show that phrasing, right? So one of the things that I've had so many students who come to me, I think I want to major in conducting as an undergrad. And I think that that can be quite dangerous. Most musicians will not accept somebody who cannot execute the ideas on their own instrument first. All right, this is why so many conductors, and I also have an issue with this idea that if you're a great violinist, if you're a great pianist, that automatically makes you a great conductor. I don't think so. It's two different set skills. However, the person who is a great violinist, like Itzhak Perlman, he's now having a career as a conductor. And I have no problem with that because he has instant recognition and approval when he steps in front of an orchestra because they all know what he's able to do musically. Maybe not with his hands, but with the violin. He is a great musician. So the orchestra will say, okay, we want ideas. We'll figure out how to make that idea happen with this crazy thing he's doing with his hands. But we know at least what the idea is, right? When I saw Placido Domingo, and he was conducting the Ravinia Festival, and this is quite early in his conducting career. Like he was known mainly as a singer, and he was conducting Czech 4. And the Chicago Symphony musicians who play in Ravinia at that point, they hate playing in Ravinia because they want to just relax in the summer. And usually it takes somebody really inspiring to get their engine fired up. And I saw my teacher and all these Chicago musicians come out of that week with Domingo sing this. I have no idea what he's doing with his hand. Because he would do things like that. And you're like, what? How did that work? So I'm watching the rehearsals and he's doing these things like, he's like literally doing this to the orchestra. And then it happens. I'm like, come on, like, come on. But the musical intent was clear to the orchestra, right? Technique wise, it was like, what? I want to know what that means. But they all respected his musicianship and they kind of gave him a pass on his technique because they realized, okay, you know what? He's not exactly showing it, but we understand what he wants, right? So that is better than somebody who's really clean, all the cues in the right place, right tempo, but then it all looks flat because there's no musical idea, right? We don't want that, right? Early in my career, people would say, orchestra would say to me, man, you're so clear. It's great. I hated getting that compliment because that meant, oh, yet again, I failed to show something musical. Because rather than after a concert, like hour and a half of music, I would rather someone say, you know that phrasing you did on that third movement, that was really beautiful. That's the feedback that I wanted. But all I got was, man, you're so clear. It makes my job really easy. Thanks. Oh, okay. I'm just the traffic cop making your day easier. All right. So so listen to other people, play it yourself, try to execute that musical phrasing yourself, right? And there's so much resources at your fingertips, right? You should be listening to great recordings, great performances all the time, right? Seek out musicians and say, so like my son's learning the Bach Prelude in C major for the first time, and he's going through listening to different recordings, and already he's starting to form opinions about, man, this guy's too romantic, and I'm going, you're 12, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, I like Yo-Yo Ma's version the best. I was like, well, you should listen a little more, right? But like I wished I had that, right? That ability to go to listen to like 20 different versions of the Bach Prelude when I was 12 and have opinions, right? So listen to great performers and great artists, right? And that'll start to give you an idea of, oh, that's the variety and that's the spectrum of rubatos that I can do, right? And there are rubatos that feel natural. I'm a natural person, right? Anything that doesn't feel organic is weird to me, right? And that's a lesson I learned from Abbado. All of his rubatos are so organic. It comes naturally, unfolds in a way that makes sense, right? There is none of these like three and down. What? How is the end of four longer than the entire third beat, right? So so that'll be my advice, right? Listen, reproduce, and do it again. Great question. That's a really important question. Okay, what else? Just a couple, we didn't quite get to the Beethoven again because I'm so, I talk too much. Just a reminder, who's going to present on Wednesday? Didn't we set this up already?
Me and Peter, I think.
All right, so Amy and Peter are up, and then the Monday after that,
Me.
Rachel?
And I think someone else, but I don't remember.
And then EJ and Rehan, is your understanding when the next Wednesday?
I think next Wednesday is like me and Alec.
Okay, Rehan, when are you going?
I'm Monday with Rachel.
Okay, all right, so let me write it down. So this Wednesday is Amy and Peter. Monday is Rachel and Rehan. And then Wednesday is EJ and Alec. Okay, I'll send a reminder to everybody. Okay, all right. I'm trying to get to all the video reviews. So maybe before you make the Beethoven 5 video, don't do it until you get the feedback from me. Because I'm starting to see a couple patterns and I'm trying to sprinkle them into feedback of your previous videos. Okay.
Professor, all my videos are on the Google Drive that I sent at the beginning of the semester, but if you want, I can move them all to YouTube so they're on Canvas, but I don't think they show up.
That'd be great because I can just give you.
Yeah, then you can just do them on
Yeah,
Canvas.
exactly. Yeah, I'd rather keep it all in one place. Otherwise,
Yeah.
there's too many places.
I don't know if you remember at the start, you had first said we can add it to Google Drive, or before we had a section in Canvas, it was either YouTube or Google
Yeah,
Drive.
just put it on YouTube and send me the link on Canvas. That'd be.
Okay, I'll do it for all because I think I only have one on Canvas right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
All right,
Okay.
awesome.
Okay, I will do my best to try to get to all the video feedback today so that you have it, and then watch those first before you make the Beethoven 5. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
You.
Actually, like half a